Hello, Kim. So you're tuning in from Pensacola area. Tell us a little bit
Correct.
about yourself.
Hi, my name is Kim Kline, and I am running for the Florida House District 2, which encompasses Pensacola, which is in Escambia County, the southern part of Escambia County, all the way over into Santa Rosa County, and includes the areas of Gulf Breeze and Navarre Beach and parts of Navarre as well. So it's a huge district,
Yeah.
and we've got quite a huge group of people living there from all different walks of life, all different makeups, all different political affiliations. So I'm trying to appeal to all of them.
Everybody. And what caused you to get into politics? And tell us a little bit about your why.
Okay, well, let me tell you a little bit about myself first, and I'll kind of
Mm-hmm.
tell you the catalyst for getting this. So my name's Kim Kline. I am a resident here. I've lived in the Pensacola area for about 20 years. I'm married to an Air Force veteran, which is a very veteran-centric area of the country. I have 4 kids. We have 5 kids. We have 4 grandkids. I am also a former teacher. I taught at our local high school here and for Santa Rosa County Schools for almost a decade. I taught all the government classes. I taught AP Government, AP Comparative Politics. I was the coach of the speech and debate team. So I know how government is supposed to work.
Yes, I
Yeah.
understand that.
But I'm also a small business owner. So I have owned a retirement community on the west side of Pensacola, which is a very working class, not particularly affluent area, but a nice working class area. I have owned this business since 2008. It is not a nursing home. It is not assisted living. It is just an apartment complex for people over 60. I serve about 102 seniors there. I have been able to operate this business under market rents, no subsidies from anyone since 2008. I don't make a killing, but I can make a living, and I can provide a service to my community, which I feel right.
Yes.
In 2022, I decided to leave teaching and take over running my business full time. I had a property manager. She was ready to retire. So it was a good time to move over. And within a year of leaving education and managing my business full time, I got my property insurance premium notice, and I got it in March of last year, and it quadrupled. It went from $42,000 a year to $104,000 a year, which completely that's my entire profit for the entire year. So that's scary. You know what I mean? As a small business owner, this is how I live, right? But
Yes.
so the bigger problem with this was, oh my gosh, I can't increase my rents enough to cover this because my seniors are all on Social Security. They're all on
Fixed income. Yeah.
So I called my insurance agent and I said, hey, how can this be happening? And he said, well, you should call your elected officials because they haven't been doing their job. And so I called my elected officials. I called my state senator's office, and he did not call me back. No one from that office called me back. I called my representative's office, and his name is Representative Andrade. He did not call me back, but one of his staff, his aide, called me back, and it was a very nice young man. And we had a nice long conversation about a lot of things. And one of the things I said to him is I said, hey, man, why is nobody talking about property insurance? Because this cannot just be affecting me. This is going to be a big deal for everybody. And he said, well, ma'am, insurance isn't sexy. Voters won't vote on insurance.
Wow.
And so that's my catalyst. I was like, I think they will.
They sure will.
Yeah. We have spent so much time in our state voting on these hot button social issues, the whole woke agenda and all that is like, and at the end of the day, that affects none of us. Like, what's affecting us is the cost of property insurance, the drastic increase in a lack of affordable and attainable homes in our area. It's terrible. We're not like the rest of Florida. Northwest Florida is kind of like lower Alabama. We're like the last bastion of real Florida. And so folks that have lived here for years. There's families that have lived here for years. And it's kind of a more of a laid back, Jimmy Buffett kind of way of life up here, and what we've seen is this drastic, a lot of factors including drastic overdevelopment, that is affecting all of us, because we now know there was no pre-planning on the part of the state. There was no, this issue of property insurance, for instance, this alarm has been sounded since at least 2011 by people much more educated in the field than I am. I mean, I kind of did a deep dive into this, but this is something that it's been presented to multiple legislatures over the years. It's been presented to 2 different governors, that if we do not get a handle on this property insurance crisis, it has the potential to completely destroy our local economies, not just because of the cost of, you're a senior citizen and you've paid off your home early, so you don't have to worry about a mortgage payment, and now you're getting hit with a $10,000 or $15,000 property insurance bill at the end of the year. And how many years are you going to be able to pay that before you've wiped out your savings for retirement? Yeah. And for renters, this is I'm a landlord. I really, I like being able to get good people in and then give them a reasonable rent. It's like it's a trade-off. What's happening is people cannot afford it. On the west side of Pensacola, where my business is, 5 years ago, you could rent a 2-bedroom apartment for $750 a month. That same apartment today is over $1,400, and no one's income has doubled in 5 years.
I agree. I agree. And you're right. You said that folks did start talking about this before. I do know in 4 years ago, or between 2 and 4 years ago, whichever election that was, I had interviewed someone who kept saying the most important crisis is the property insurance crisis. And at that time, I will not lie, I didn't feel it as we feel it now. But since then, he kept saying, that's really where the Florida legislation needs to be focused. They need to be made to sort this out. Right. Now I see that this is disrupted the lives of Floridians.
Right. Disrupted. And it's crisis. I mean, we're in a crisis mode now.
Yeah, we sure are.
So it's going to take, I think, it's going to take more drastic measures in order to right the ship. Whereas the little things could have been done earlier that could have averted this catastrophe. So last year, there was a bill sponsored. It was a bipartisan bill sponsored by Republican Spencer Roach and Democrat Hillary Casal. And it's called HB 1213. And they were allowed to present it to leadership. It never made it out of committee. It never got any serious consideration. I know that I found out about it because they did do a series of interviews with the press across the state, trying to get voters interested in this. And ultimately, they weren't successful because leadership kind of locked it up. If you take a look at the financial disclosures or the campaign finance reports, not even looking at the PAC money, which is completely different, you'll see that one of the largest contributors to political campaigns in this state is the insurance industry. And when you take a look at a lot of the legislation that was passed that was supposed to address our insurance crisis, was very friendly to the industry at the expense of the consumer. And a perfect example is the bill that was passed to limit lawsuits. Right. So I'm not going to argue that perhaps some sort of tort reform may have been needed. But what was included in this bill was that, you have a claim, you file with your insurance company and they don't pay it. And you have to sue them in order to get them to pay the claim, which you rightfully deserve. Right. I live in the Gulf Coast. I have been through multiple hurricanes. And I can tell you that every one of my friends who's had to sue their insurance company did not want to sue their insurance company. It was not their choice. They just wanted to fix their homes. So now what happens, according to this new law, is that you have to sue your insurance company. And when you're done, they don't have to pay any of your legal fees. They cannot by law include any of your legal fees in the settlement, which means now you, the consumer, have to go toe to toe with the insurance company in order to get paid. Wow. Individual person. And how much money are we each individually going to have to do that? I mean, it's and it's just a disaster. So I have a lot of information on my website about HB 1213 and what it does. And essentially what it does is it takes the the riskiest part of property insurance in Florida is wind, right? Is wind mitigation. So what it does is it restructures Citizens Insurance, which is our state-owned public option for property insurance. And it just makes it a wind-only company. It pushes all of their coverage back out into the private market again. So the idea behind that is you push all this back out into the private market. You take the most expensive part of coverage out of the private company's responsibility. So now they can make money again, right? So to the state, and they can reduce their rates and become competitive because they're not having to worry about covering the wind mitigation losses the same way. So then Citizens becomes essentially like a mutual fund where that wind policy that we all pay into this. If we're homesteaded, we buy a wind policy through Citizens. And if we have a quiet year, instead of all those profits being paid out to, you know, a CEO or boards or whatever, that money just rolls back over into the next year. So it becomes self-funding, especially if we have a couple quiet years. Texas already does this. So this is not, they're not reinventing the wheel here. Texas does this. And also California is doing a similar policy now because of their issues with wildfires and with earthquakes that are specific to their states. You know what I mean?
Okay. All righty.
So that's the general principle of it. And people will say, oh, yeah, but if we have 2 or 3 hurricanes in a year, then we're going to deplete that fund and they're going to have to put assessments out to the citizens. Well, first of all, that's going to happen anyway. There's already a law that says that if we deplete the fund, that the citizens are going to be hit with that. But I will also argue that if we get hit with 2 or 3 big storms a year, we're going to be begging the federal government for help anyway.
Yeah.
We are not be able to cover that. So why not put that money into a fund that we don't lose every year? We're all spending all this money on property insurance every single year, and it goes away at the end of the year, and we have to start all over again. If we could have a fund and that money could just keep rolling over, then eventually our rates are going to go down. At the very least, they're going to stabilize, and we can plan for it because we know they aren't going to continue to go up, and we don't have that knowledge now. You know, it's hard for businesses to plan ahead. You know, I mean, my entire retirement is wrapped up in my business. You know, I mean, that is, and I have, like I said, I have over 100 seniors that live in my community. When this started happening and I was thinking, I'm going to have to raise rents, I knew that under the lack of affordability and what the new average rates were in Pensacola, I knew that probably more than half of my seniors would qualify for subsidized housing vouchers. So I went to the city and I said, hey, I got a whole bunch of seniors and they're very proud folks and they don't, you know what I mean? They don't know how to ask for help, but how can we expedite the process so that they can get some housing aid? And the city said, we don't have any. That the HUD voucher list closed last June. You can't even get on the waiting list. There's so many people trying to get housing assistance. And I said, well, is there like a fast track for senior citizens? And she said, no, because 80% of the people who get housing vouchers are either senior citizens or disabled people. 80%.
Wow.
Which is a big wake-up call for a lot of folks who have this idea that it's just all these people who don't want to work that are getting housing.
Yeah.
Most of it is people who cannot work. Half my residents don't drive. They, you know, probably a quarter of them use walkers. They can't work one job, let alone 2 jobs in order to pay for this housing. So as what's turned out is that I am personally subsidizing my residents, and this is untenable for me.
Yeah.
And
I wonder how come a lot more people just aren't sensitive to the fact that our seniors are either on the verge of literally being thrown out of their housing and wondering where to go, or worried as heck about it. Like really, really worried, because even the average Floridian can't really survive Florida anymore. And no one seems to really be addressing it fully.
Right. Yeah.
It's almost like we're being pushed out of Florida.
we see all these news reports, and leadership in Tallahassee keeps acting like it's this great thing that 1,000 new people are moving to Florida, 1,000 new people are moving to Florida. And I think the excitement about that is that that a lot of these folks are conservative. So from a Republican leadership standpoint, it's like, look, we're getting all these new Republicans in. Well, the Republican Party of Florida has had a supermajority for years. I mean, they have had complete control of the state legislature for 2 decades.
Yeah.
So anything that they want to do, any problems that they've wanted to solve, they have had the political power to do that, and they have not. So with great power comes great responsibility, and it also means that you have to either put up or shut up. Either, and what we haven't seen that. I'm not affiliated with a political party. I am an independent. I am an NPA.
Okay.
And I can tell you that I haven't always been an NPA. This is really, I kind of got into becoming independent about 10 years ago whenever I started teaching government classes. And I was like,
oh, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay.
Well, it seems very odd to me that anyone in Northwest Florida would subscribe wholly to a political platform that was created by a group of people who live in Washington, D.C. I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican, the platforms are not made for us, right? And so the idea of representative government is that you select some of the best and the brightest in your community, and you send them to your state capital to represent you, Northwest Florida, right? Or Central Florida, or wherever wherever your district is.
Yeah.
And then that person is responsible for their votes, and they have to come back and they have to explain their voting. And more importantly, they have to communicate what's going on with their constituents, and they have to say, hey, what do we want to do on this? How do you want me to represent you? And that's not what's happening. What we are seeing is a political party agenda being pushed. And regardless of what part of the state you live in, you're supposed to just be a good soldier and vote R, and don't ask any questions about the fact that we're trying to preserve what we have. If you've not ever been here, I would invite you to come. It's one of the most beautiful parts of the state.
It sure is. It's like the untouched jewel of the state, in my opinion. It's the best part of our state. I did a lot of family vacations down in Destin area, so I'm completely familiar with, just driving through there and going down. And Pensacola, we do a lot of work in Alabama, so we're always, through Pensacola, and it's just beautiful. It's a gorgeous, just quiet. I love the area. And so I feel for so much of Florida right now.
We're losing it because there's a lot of South Florida developers that have their eye on
oh my goodness gracious, no.
But
I've always compared it to and thought, yes, it's not like South Florida.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so that's what we're fighting against here. Is we're fighting against legislation that's been created by our representatives locally to pull more and more power away from our local governments and concentrate that power in Tallahassee. And what that means is that if we as a community have an issue with something that's happening, now we have to drive 3.5 hours to Tallahassee, if they'll even see us, because they have all kinds of rules on protesting up there and everything. That's not, here it's like if it's local, it's our friends and neighbors that are sitting on the city council or sitting on the board of county commissioners or the fire district board. We can go on a Tuesday after work and we can say, hey, we've got an issue with this. And if we have enough people behind us, we can get some movement. So we're losing home rule to a large degree. These preemptive bills that have come out of Tallahassee, none of our representatives locally are stopping them. They're voting for all of them. And so that is, I feel like if I can win, and I do believe I will, if I can win as an independent who's not attached to a political party, who is basing this whole process on the way it's supposed to be constitutionally, in individual representatives to represent an individual district, then I suspect that you're going to see independent candidates popping up all over the state. And I think that if we can start this happening, then you're going to see a lot more common sense decisions being made there, where we're not making decisions based on what a party tells us we're supposed to do. We're making decisions for the greatest good of the greatest number of people in our district. And that means everybody in our district. That means Republicans, Democrats, independents, NPAs, libertarians. That means you consider everybody who lives here. And so what I've done in this campaign is I've talked to everybody. I've talked to everybody. That's the beauty of running as an independent, is everybody with me a minute of their time. And so I've narrowed down the 3 issues that I think are the most important to people in my district, which is House District 2, and I think probably to people across the state. But what that is the property insurance crisis, property insurance reform, affordable and attainable housing. You know, it's like I said, it's seniors, but it's also young families trying to get by. It's the couple who got married and would like to try to buy their first home, but they can't afford it because it's completely, there's not enough homes in their price range for them to be able to have the American dream.
Yeah.
And the last issue is public education. You know, I was a public school teacher. I believe very, very deeply in the power of public education. I am a product of Florida schools. It was a bridge out of poverty for me. And I think that it is a bridge out of poverty for a lot of people. And I have seen in the class, as a teacher in the classroom, and even outside the classroom, is this kind of continual assault on Florida teachers, this continual assault on public education, to defund public education, to privatize public education, to move money. I call it outsourcing. You know, we know how outsourcing goes. We all remember when we used to actually be able to call the phone company and talk to the company, but all of those things have been outsourced. So that's what's happening. So you take a nonprofit model of education, which was never supposed to be, it was always supposed to be a state responsibility, right? It's in our Florida Constitution that every student in this state has the right to a free, fair, and public education. If you take a public function and you try to privatize it, that means now something that didn't have a profit margin has to have a profit margin. So either services to students are going to get cut, or teachers are going to be underpaid, or teachers are going to be underqualified. You know, a lot of these new schools that are popping up that don't have certified teachers. They don't have to have teachers with even bachelor's degrees. Wow. So what does that Florida look like in 20 years?
Yeah.
Jefferson said that democracy cannot function with an uneducated electorate. I believe that if we do not jump in front of this could be, it's already happening. I mean, we have to get people.
It's already hard.
We have to get people engaged. We have to get people, you know, talking about accurate data when we make decisions about how we vote. And it's already so confusing because there's so much bad information out there. And it's really, really imperative that we have representatives that are going to be honest conduits of information from Tallahassee, so that we on the state level, we on the local level, know what's happening at the state level. Because for a lot of us, we've been blindsided by either inactivity of the legislature or activity that, you know, bills that are passed in relative secrecy. Because when you have
so much secrecy,
when you have a supermajority, you don't have to have a public debate. It's just pushed through. Everything is just, legislation is pushed through. And let's just talk about last session. Over 200 new laws have taken effect as a result of last session. So these guys, if you don't know, if the voters don't know, the Florida legislature meets 6 weeks a year. Their session is 6 weeks long. You tell me how you were able to read, research, and communicate with your constituents about over 200 bills, some of which were dozens and dozens of pages, 100 pages long.
Wow, I did not realize.
How do you know what you're voting for? How can you possibly pass over 200 new laws? Because there's no way that they researched the laws. There's no way that they reached out to their local constituents and said, how's this going to impact us? So it's irresponsible. And then they pass these laws that are not funded, and they send them down to the county and city governments, and they say, make this so. This is the new thing you have to do. And the city governments are like, but we don't have the money to enforce this law.
That's exactly what's happening in Broward right now with the homeless issue. That they're
That's
scrambling.
happening here too.
Okay.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm
Wow.
on the Homelessness Reduction Task Force, Affordable Housing
Mhm.
Subcommittee downtown, and we are having the same issue. Look, homelessness was becoming a real problem here. I'm not gonna say it wasn't,
Mhm.
but you're going to pass a law that's going to outlaw public camping and say that these folks all have to be moved out of these public spaces. Then you also have to allow the sheriff's department and the police department money to make sure that these folks get to the places they need to get
You
to,
would
whether it's
expect
homeless
that to
shelter.
be a given.
Yeah, whether it's the homeless shelter, whether it is drug rehab or mental health facilities, whatever, or just helping them find a family member and get off the streets.
Mhm. Yeah.
We have a terrible crisis here right now that we're trying to figure out how we're going to pay for this law that was passed without any consideration of. It's like, do they really think that the county and city governments weren't already concerned about homelessness? That they really thought there are literally hundreds of people in my district from all different nonprofits, from all different parts
Mhm.
of the county government that have been spending tons of man hours trying to solve this crisis and figure out what to do. But now we have, with this new law, come January, if an individual citizen calls and complains about an encampment somewhere near their property on public
Mhm.
land, if that issue is not dealt with immediately or in a way that that citizen feels like is acceptable under the law, they now can sue their city and county governments. So in addition to not having the funding to carry out this law in the first place, now we're going to be subject to lawsuits that it's going to take hundreds of thousands of dollars away from the budgets that we already have that we're having a hard time working with. So it's like, what are you doing? It's like completely
It
counterproductive.
I mean, it makes you really wonder what what the what the vision is, because it
Yeah.
definitely feels like it's to placate just maybe some people. I'm blown away. It's just not, it's not taking Floridians into account in a, wholehearted way. Yeah,
Yeah.
as you said, it's 200. I didn't realize it was that many
Yeah.
bills.
Yeah.
So I have to now get some research on that to see what are some of those. I mean, we've seen some pop up that we're like, what the heck? But
Oh, I mean, so some of the bills were really, really bad in the last session.
Mhm.
And here's one thing that I would like to express to the viewers who are watching this too. So regardless of how, and I'm trying desperately in this race not to talk about national politics, because like you said, for me, it's a diversion. For
Mhm.
me, it's an easy way for elected officials to call your attention up here and away from the fact that they maybe aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. And
Yes.
so I don't endorse anyone. I don't endorse any party.
Mhm.
I'm not endorsing any candidates. This is just me. Regardless of how you feel about Donald Trump, the result of his presidency was a placement of a whole bunch of judges that have
Mhm.
on the federal courts as well as the Supreme Court that have been consistently pushing power down to the state governments. Right, more and more power is being pushed down to the state governments, so that the state governments are having a whole host of new powers that they have to implement. The problem is that what's happening in these state governments is they are consolidating this power in their legislature, in their state legislatures, and in their executive branches. So the governor and the state legislature, and they're
Okay.
pulling that power away from the local people and the local governments. So the
Okay.
people have to get ready. I mean, I know it's a pain in the neck to pay attention to local and state politics, but folks have got to start doing that, because we are losing our individual power. We are losing the right to have our communities be reflective of us, of the
Mhm.
people who live there, and especially in our part of the state where we're not like the rest of the state. We don't want to be. I mean, we
Yeah.
don't want to be Miami. We don't want to be Tampa. We
Mhm.
want to be Pensacola. We want to be Gulf Breeze and Pensacola Beach and Perdido Key and Navarre Beach. I mean,
And
that's what we.
that's how it's supposed to be. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would implore, like, people to pay attention to these down ballot races, to find out who these people are in your community that want to represent you, and make sure that they want to represent you and
Mhm.
not some nefarious uh, interests outside your district. And a really good way to do that is if you go on to the Florida Division of Elections and you can look up your candidate reports. There's a place where you can see campaign finance reports and campaign finance contributions. It's not super user friendly. You might have to play around with it for a minute. But if you click it, you can see all of the donations that have come into your candidate's campaign. Mm-hmm. So in my particular instance, I have two opponents in this campaign. I have a Democrat and I have a Republican, but it's the Republican he's the incumbent and he's been in place for 6 years. If you take a look, more than 90% of his donations come from outside District 2.
Wow.
Okay. So almost 100% of my donations are from District 2. They're from my friends and neighbors. They're small donations. There's not a lot of big donations on there. And it's significantly, I'm not going to raise $300,000, but it's important because I'm not going outside the district and asking them what I can do for them. I'm going to the people I work with, the people I go to church with, the people that live on my street, the teachers I worked with in the schools. And I'm saying, hey, help me. Mm-hmm. I want to help you. I'm going to be there for you and tell me what you want. And that's what we have to get back to. And the only way we can get back to that kind of representation is if we pay attention to the local and state races.
Well, I am so happy that I had this interview with you because this is why I did this series. It's because I felt like young people, no, not even just young people. I felt like our attention, is just not there. And they're so plugged in nationally and not plugged in locally and not realizing that this is really what impacts their everyday life. Right. And I thought, well, what can I do? And I said, well, we'll just break it down, bite-sized interviews. We'll come back again to you guys, but bite-sized interviews so that they could really get to hear from the candidates. And I think that for sure, when folks listen to you today, they will really understand what's happening at a statewide level and why they really need to pay attention. And so thank you for affirming for me as well that what I am doing here is the right thing. Because
what you're doing is so important. It's so important because that's been the hardest part of this campaign, is engaging young people. And, young people are my jam. I mean, I taught high school kids. I taught all the AP classes. I mean, this is where I just I would really like them to get excited about the fact that, I used to tell my students, I'm like, if you look at any major social change, if you look at any kind of major improvement that we saw over time from the American Revolution on, it's always led by young people. Yeah. It's always led by young people because they're idealists, Yeah. And if you can get them jazzed and you can get them feeling like, and they in a lot of ways have felt powerless. They feel powerless to the establishment. They feel powerless to the status quo. And so getting involved in a local election, in a local race, as a volunteer, as a influencer, this can have such an important impact on your local community, way more than the position you take on Palestine and Israel or whatever. The things that you see, and even to a certain degree, climate change, which we all know it's happening. Everybody feels powerless, but on the local level, you can focus on things like wastewater management and why do we not have enough funding for our infrastructure to keep up with the rising sea levels and the increased rainfall that's happening, that's causing our neighborhoods to flood. And this is devastating to a lot of low income and even middle class folks, because not everybody has flood insurance if they don't live in a flood zone. And so I guess that's what I'm saying is if we can break it down into bite-sized chunks like you're doing, then young people can recognize I can impact change. I can be the change, as Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. You can do that. It's just not going to be flashy. It's not going to be sexy.
That's it.
Important.
It is important. And I think a lot of them feel very stressed out as well, like stressed out into I am not able to make any change. And one of the things I've said repeatedly, even to my kids and my nieces and nephews, is this: change your community, change your neighborhood, change your friends. Just focus on a group. And if we're all focused on a group,
Mhm.
we can have tremendous power instead of us being deflated because we're looking at the world and thinking we can't change all of this. I don't know if
Right.
that's something you see in them, but that's definitely something I've seen. And I'm like,
Yeah, they're
we gotta,
overwhelmed.
they're completely overwhelmed. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that is, if your broadcast, if your series is able to engage younger voters, and I think that would be tremendous, and I applaud you for making the decision to do this, because it's the responsibility, I think, of the press, regardless of which publication you represent, but it's ultimately the responsibility of the press to hold truth to power.
Yeah.
And you can, the fact that you're drawing attention to down ballot races is so important, because it's just so easy to talk about national politics. It's so divisive. It gets people so fired up. You have to take the time to explain things when you're talking about local and state politics, because even though, like you said, this is the stuff that impacts us the most people have no idea how it works.
None. And I realize they do want to be heard. A lot of young people, they do want to be heard. They want folks to listen, and they want to know that they're being spoken to. And so we'll just keep trying. That's it. That's all we can do.
Well, you're doing a great job. I appreciate you.
Kim, you're doing an excellent job, and we will come back certainly to keep following up with you and help as much as we can, and utilize a lot of our resources to help, for sure, because we need these explanations. And I've actually traveled with a state Senate candidate, and I'll tell you something: the insurance crisis is on everyone's mind.
Good.
Everyone's minds like that. People need to realize that probably is the top priority for Floridians, and affordable housing. Those two,
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah, and if we can get voters to show up to these down ballot races, and to really to make those demands of their elected officials, to say this needs to be the priority. We don't want 200 bills about nonsense. What we want is a couple good solid bills that are funded, and that are researched, that we know can work to get us some relief, because I know I can't wait another 2 years for something to happen. And I guarantee you the seniors in my community can't wait. And the seniors and people who are trying to figure out how they're going to pay these astronomical insurance rates, like, the people are going to have to sell their homes. People are going to have to leave the state in order to survive. I have 5 adult kids. None of them live here anymore because they can't afford to.
They can't afford it.
They can't afford to. And so I want my kids to come back.
Correct. No, and that's the truth. We want a state where our kids, in the past, my issue with Florida was I wanted a state where my kids could go to college and then come back and get a good paying job and, live comfortably. That seems we've got that. Okay. The kids are back. Now they freaking well can't afford to live here.
Right.
Can't.
Yep.
They can't afford to live here independently, and then they don't necessarily want to all everyone live together. Where I'm saying, hey, this is the economics of what it is, but it's expensive. It is not conducive to us, really, especially our seniors. Though I worry about their sense of worry.
Yeah. Well, and you look at how many seniors live in the state of Florida. I mean, we have a disproportionate amount of our population are senior citizens. And so, we've marketed ourselves for the last 50 years, at least my lifetime, of being this great retirement haven, because we have no income tax, right? But what people don't realize is that it may not have a state income tax, but we are nickeled and dimed on everything else, with fees and assessment and property taxes. And so it's not an equal, you would think, with all the Disney money and things that, the tourism dollars that come in, that at least the folks at the bottom and retirees would have a little bit more
Of
cushion.
somewhat of
And
a safety net,
a
yeah.
lot of that has to do with, in my opinion, the funding, the spending of the state legislature is not. The money is not going where it should be going, in my opinion. A lot of this money is being diverted to pet projects that are not benefiting the greatest number of Floridians. I think that there is way more money in the pot that should be spent on our local communities, money that should be going out into to the municipal and county governments, so that we can fix things on a smaller scale, as opposed to these little projects that appropriations gives out with this.
Yeah.
With if you come and kiss the ring, we give you money for supporters. I mean, that's not the way we're supposed to do it. That's not how it's supposed to work. Not good government anyway.
Well, Kim, this was great. Please tell folks how they could find you so that we can have people engage with you.
Absolutely. So if you'll visit my website, it's votekimkline.com. That's Kline. It's spelled a little differently. So votekimkline.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, on Instagram. It's Kim Kline for Florida House 2. And on my website, there are ways to engage. There's ways to donate. Obviously, we can always use money. I can tell you, we are the grassiest of the grassroots campaigns up here trying to do this. This is a citizen initiative. But also just if you have questions, or if you're thinking about in the future, hey, maybe I'd like to run for office, or how does this work? Or, send me an email. There's a click on there where you can send me an email, send me your contact information. Things are crazy right now. We're in the last 53 days of the campaign. So I may be a little slow getting back to you, but your ideas are important to me as well. So you think of something that you think might help, or if any of your viewers are in the District 2 area or the Pensacola area, please reach out to me. I can use your help. I really, really could use your help. We have really done fantastic with a lot of new groups that have come into. I've gotten some great endorsements. I got the endorsement of Save Our Soundside, which is our local environmentalist group. I also got the endorsement of all of our local labor unions, which has been huge.
Nice. That's huge.
And that's brought more people into the fold. But we are, this is a race where, I'm going to need 40,000 people to vote for me, and that's a lot of touches. So as many people as get out to help me get the word out, help me touch voters so that they know that there is another alternative besides the two-party system that we have grown accustomed to, which in a lot of ways is failing us.
I hear that. Kim, thank you again for joining us. We look forward to bringing you back on the show, because you're doing your thing and you're doing it well. I have to say that. Thank you.
Thank you.